In the video of today, I want to talk about the number one tool to build your Docker images and also to automate the generation of your manifest files from Kubernetes. This tool is called Skaffold. Skaffold is an open source project currently under the Apache 2 license. This means that you can use Skaffold safely in any of the projects that you might be working. Skaffold is used obviously inside of Google for some of their internal projects, but also many important companies such as Netflix, Spotify, Lyft, or Altasian, they are using Skaffold to build their images and to make their deployments on Kubernetes. If we go to their website, we can see it's a pretty simple website, but at the beginning of the page, we can see a small tutorial about how to use Skaffold. We also can download Skaffold for our laptop or for some machine that we might be having. It is also interesting to see their GitHub page, in which we can see it's in Apache 2 license. We can see also that it has at this time 393 contributors and that it is basically developed in Go. Remember that Go is a language developed also by Google. Then it is very interesting also to see this Skaffold YAML page in which we are going to see the main tags that we can use in a YAML file to perform the instructions that will be recognized by the Skaffold binary once we launch the command. But we are going to see it with more detail in our tutorial. But before going to the tutorial, let me present the sponsor of the channel, which is Datapta. Datapta is a consulting company specialized in big data, public cloud, and DevOps. Datapta has a team of experienced engineers who work with the best companies in the world to bring their tech projects to life. If you need to deal with big amounts of data, deploy your infrastructure on the cloud, or automate your deployments, you can email to info@datapta.com or just use the contact form on their website. Let's analyze a real-life project in which we have a React application in the front end, and then in the backend we have several Node.js applications that act as an API server and that will be queried from the React application. Here we are in VS Code editor and we can see the Skaffold YAML. But before going into detail in the code of this file, let's see how it is placed in the structure of our project. We can see this is the Skaffold YAML, which is with this name, and it is placed in the root directory of our project. We can see how we have put everything in a single, let's say, repository. And we have the React application in FinLooker frontend. Then we also have these FinLooker servers, which correspond to the APIs written in Node.js. Then for everything that has to do with the manifest files that we will be using for our Kubernetes, and that we'll be using also Kustomize, but we will see this in a moment. We place all these infrastructure files inside of this FinLooker infra folder. So here we are back in our code now, and we can see how the Skaffold file starts with an API version, and then we have to determine, specify that is a configuration kind of file. Basically, we can see how this Skaffold file is structured in different profiles. We can see that we have specified one profile for the development environment called dev. Then we also have one for production and another one for staging. So let's see how the production environment is defined here. We can see that we start with the name of this profile, which is called PRD. And then we can see this tag about the activation command and we have called it with the same name, PRD. This will be used once we invoke the command, the scaffold command from command line, and is the name that will be used to determine that we have to use this profile, the production one. Then we can see here how this build tag is indicating everything that has to do with the building of the Docker images, and the deploy tag is going to indicate everything that has to do with the manifest. So let's go into more detail into the build tag. We can see here this local and push equals to true. This indicates that the moment that the scaffold is building the images, the React image and also the Node.js images, we want to push them into a registry. In this case, it will be a Docker registry. So for this, we will have to make Docker login before running the scaffold command. Then we also can see the concurrency tag. In this case, this determines how much concurrency are we going to have at the moment of building these Docker images. If we put 0, this means that we will have or will request infinite concurrency to our machine. So this is going to exploit our machine in terms of resources at the moment of building the images. And then we have these other tags about use Docker CLI and use build kit equals to true and true. For these ones, this means that we want to use the Docker commands at the moment of building the images. Then we can see the artifacts tag, in which we specify the name of the images that we are going to build. In this case, we are going to build one image for the React frontend, and then we are only going to build one of the Node.js APIs. We determine the name of the image, and then for each one of them we have to determine the context. The context is telling Skaffold where the Docker files are going to be located. In this case, we will be going to the root of the project, and then we are going to tell to Skaffold that the Docker file for the frontend is in the frontend folder. And here is where the magic of Skaffold comes, and it is with this sync tag. This sync tag, it is basically saying to Skaffold that whenever the developer makes any change in some of the files located in this folder, in the source folder, we are going to copy those changes into the destination of the Docker container itself without having to rebuild the whole project. So you can imagine that this is saving a ton of time in the development phase. So here we can see how we specify the source folder. This means that whenever any file inside of the source folder and inside of these subdirectories with the termination or with the extension of JavaScript is changed, we are going to copy those files back to the Docker container image. To the Docker container. And we specify the same, but for the Node.js API. So this everything you have to know know the basics and to have something running with respect to the build tag. And then with respect to the deploy tag, we can see how here we have used the Kustomize to manage the manifest files. In this case, we are going to specify the path where our production manifests are located. In the case, we didn't want to use Kustomize, but we only wanted to use the typical manifest files from Kubernetes, we would have to specify it with this tag, kubectl and then manifest. In this case, you can see how the path is another one, which is for another test. But because this is a real-life application and we have different environments, it is much more convenient to use Kustomize. So in this video, we are not going to explain the customized part. Please check out another video that we have in the YouTube channel that is talking about how to use Kustomize and how to configure it. And now I think this would be like the most important part of this video, which is how to use then Skaffold in command line. Basically, we can differentiate from this list of commands, which I think they are the most important commands in Skaffold. If we use a Skaffold dev, this command is the one that is going to enable us to make modifications in our code and to see the changes instantly because Skaffold it is loading those changes in the containers under the hood or in the background. And if we just want to build the images without touching anything from the manifest files, we are going to use Skaffold build. And in the case we want to just render or just generate the manifest files without rebuilding the images, we have to use render. So at the moment we have something deployed in some cluster or locally, and we make some modification in the manifest files, we are going to use the sync command. So here you can see how these three commands typically work together. But in the case we want to make it everything at the same time, we would just use the Skaffold run command. The Skaffold run command would make the build, the render of the manifest, and would make the upload of everything in the cluster. And finally, if we just wanted to delete everything that we have deployed, we just run the Skaffold delete command. In the case of using the Skaffold dev, at the moment that we press Ctrl+C, everything will be deleted in the cluster or just locally. For our purpose, in real-life scenarios, typically we are going to use the Skaffold command separately. We are going to use this build, render, and sync command separately. So we are going to have more control in our commands, and we are going to be able to play with other tools like ArgoCD to make our GitOps pipelines. So, for example, to see a Skaffold command that was run in the past, we can have a look here at the terminal, and we can see that the Skaffold build -p prd was used. This one was the command that we were commenting before, and this one is going to build the images. We are going to build the images according to the profile that is called prd, as we have seen before. And after the images are built, we are going to run the Skaffold render. This part of the process, it is just going to pick everything that is related to the Kubernetes manifest, and it is going to do a render according to what we define in the profile of PRD, which is production. The render files are going to be output in this directory, and this directory can then use by another tool, such as ArgoCD, in the case that we are using the typical pipeline in GitOps. Or we could also use it with another Skaffold command, which is the Skaffold sync command that we have just talked before. Or we could just use kubectl apply -f. The difference in between using the Skaffold sync and the kubectl -f is that the synchronization would apply only the changes that are required. Whereas if we use the kubectl apply -f, it would just apply all the changes in waterfall into the Kubernetes cluster. Here it is very interesting to see in this command how after the scaffold build and scaffold render, we just made a commit and a push to a GitLab repository. This is because at the moment that we make this push in the repository of the manifest files, ArgoCD is going to detect the changes in the manifest files, and it is going to apply them in a Kubernetes cluster. So now that we have talked about Skaffold and how it can be used to automate the building of the Docker images and the generation of the manifest files of the Kubernetes cluster, let's see how can we use Kustomize to parameterize all those manifest files from Kubernetes in a very lightweight manner.